My entire career within the federal law enforcement framework was built upon absolute discipline and an unwavering commitment to justice, rather than bloodlines. My name is Evelyn Vance, and I am 35 years old, holding the rank of captain within the Financial Crimes Special Task Force based in Washington. One freezing winter morning, when the first snow began to cling heavily to my office windows, I received an encrypted file from the Federal Reserve. The documents displayed a massive series of fraudulent transactions totaling over $40 million from national infrastructure funds transferred directly to a private construction firm. When my eyes landed on the legal representative listed at the bottom of the digital screen, my chest tightened sharply because it was my younger brother, Julian Vance. Julian had always been the golden child whom my parents fiercely protected and spoiled despite his continuous business bankruptcies and reckless financial failures throughout his 20s. I knew that investigating my own blood would trigger a catastrophic war with my family, but my oath as a federal officer demanded absolute loyalty to the law. I decided to drive my unmarked sedan out to my parents' luxury estate in the Virginia suburbs to verify the intelligence before the official federal arrest warrants were processed. When I stepped into the grand marble foyer, the scent of expensive scented candles and the soft hum of classical music created a completely artificial atmosphere of peaceful wealth. My father was sitting on the leather sofa next to Julian, reviewing several multi-million-dollar city zoning maps with an air of immense arrogance. Looking up at my sharp navy blue service uniform, my father immediately let out a condescending laugh, mocking my modest government salary and public service career. He proudly declared that Julian had just secured a massive federal contractor deal that would finally elevate the Vance family name to the highest peak of regional political power. I looked straight into my brother's trembling eyes and demanded an immediate accounting of the $40 million that had mysteriously appeared in his corporate account. Julian instantly turned pale, dropping his gold pen and stepping backward behind my father's broad shoulders to seek his usual childhood protection. My father stood up instantly, slamming his heavy hand onto the glass coffee table and screaming that I was an ungrateful child envious of my younger brother's brilliant success. He ordered me to leave the house immediately and demanded that I use my clearance as a police captain to erase the federal banking flags against Julian's corporation. He threatened that if I dared to harm his only son, he would utilize his vast political connections to ensure my badge was stripped and my career destroyed. I looked at my own father with a sense of absolute disappointment, but my mind remained completely focused and resolute against his hollow threats. I replied in a calm, cold voice that federal law recognized no family exceptions, and that Julian's proper place was now inside a federal interrogation room. As I turned to walk out the front door, Julian was already frantically texting his financial associates to shred the secondary accounting ledgers in a desperate attempt to destroy evidence. Upon returning to the command center, I immediately assembled a specialized team of trusted federal agents to execute a total asset freeze on all of Julian's corporate bank accounts. The legal battle erupted instantly when my father's high-priced private defense attorneys sent a formal ultimatum threatening to sue the department for administrative harassment and personal vendettas. My mother, who had not called me in over 3 years, suddenly appeared at the security gates of the federal facility with artificial tears streaming down her face. She begged me to sign a specialized systemic error waiver that would release the frozen millions so Julian could finalize his flight arrangements to a non-extradition territory. I stood perfectly straight behind the concrete security barrier, looking at her hysterical performance, and refused her request with absolute finality because that money belonged to the public. She instantly dropped her maternal act, cursing my name and calling me a heartless monster before stepping into her luxury vehicle and speeding away. The formal interrogation took place in cell block 4 of the federal courthouse after the tactical team intercepted Julian at the international airport with 2 suitcases containing cash. My brother sat across from me in a gray jumpsuit, looking completely exhausted and shaking uncontrollably as he realized that his wealth could no longer buy his freedom from the government. However, he suddenly changed his official statement under oath, falsely accusing me of being the true mastermind who provided the secure clearance codes to facilitate the money laundering. My father simultaneously launched a massive smear campaign through corrupt local media outlets, publishing fabricated articles to completely ruin my 10-year exemplary record. My commanding officer had no choice but to temporarily suspend my active duty badge pending a full internal affairs investigation, according to standard department regulations. I surrendered my weapon and walked out of the building, returning to my small apartment to privately initiate a deep digital analysis to uncover their conspiracy. I spent 7 sleepless nights analyzing encrypted data drives to recover the deleted text history from Julian's personal communication network. I successfully retrieved several hidden audio files proving that my father was the actual architect of the entire fraud scheme, having forced Julian to sign the documents to cover his own massive offshore gambling debts. With the assistance of a few loyal special agents who refused to believe the media lies, I delivered the unredacted digital logs directly to the chief federal prosecutor. The following morning, when the high-profile grand jury hearing commenced, my father walked into the courtroom with a triumphant smile, confident that my career was over. The prosecutor suddenly introduced the recovered digital recordings, causing a wave of absolute shock to ripple through the assembly and the assembled news reporters. Julian broke down, completely sobbing loudly on the witness stand and confessing that our father had instructed him to frame me to save the family empire. The final judgments were delivered with absolute severity as Julian was sentenced to 15 years in a federal penitentiary, while my father received 10 years for masterminding fraud and corporate bribery. The luxury suburban estate and every single asset tied to the illegal infrastructure funds were permanently seized by the federal marshals to compensate the victims. I was fully reinstated to my rank of captain and awarded the Distinguished Public Service Medal by the Attorney General for my unwavering courage in protecting the law. My mother was forced to relocate to a tiny rented apartment in the outer valley, completely abandoned by the high society friends who once crowded her parties. I walked out of the federal courthouse into the crisp winter air, watching the morning sun break through the dark clouds with a profound sense of peace. My name is Evelyn Vance, and I have officially proven that the honor of a dedicated law enforcement officer can never be broken by the toxic shadow of family greed. The structural destruction of the Vance family empire did not immediately bring the absolute peace I had anticipated, because the deep roots of political corruption always leave residual venom behind. My name is Evelyn Vance, and I am 35 years old, a captain in the Federal Financial Crimes Task Force who had successfully survived the ultimate betrayal by her own bloodlines. 6 months after the historic grand jury convictions, a specialized federal correctional officer from the high-security facility in Pennsylvania contacted my private line with an urgent administrative update. The officer revealed that my brother Julian had managed to secure a legal loophole by hiring an aggressive new defense team funded by anonymous offshore political action committees. They were launching a comprehensive federal civil lawsuit against the department, claiming that my internal digital evidence was completely fabricated through specialized military-grade hacking software to frame an innocent civilian. Julian was actively attempting to secure a temporary release on bail, while his new legal team demanded a full forensic audit of my personal electronics and federal clearance logs. I refused to allow their desperate legal maneuvers to shake my professional focus, so I decided to spend my weekend visiting my old tactical mentor Raymond at his country home in Maryland. Raymond was a retired federal director who had spent 40 years dismantling complex international syndicates, and he knew every single dirty trick used by desperate white-collar criminals. We sat on his open wooden back porch drinking black coffee, while the cold autumn wind rustled through the massive oak trees surrounding his isolated property line. I explained to him that Julian's new anonymous donors were clearly utilizing my brother's greed as a weapon to force me out of the federal task force before the upcoming congressional investigations. Raymond nodded his head slowly, looking out at the horizon, and advised me to remain completely still, because a cornered predator always makes a fatal mistake when its initial attacks fail to provoke panic. He reminded me that my immaculate service record and the verified physical chain of custody for the digital drives would easily withstand their fraudulent appeals. 2 weeks later, an unexpected luxury vehicle blocked the entrance to my private underground parking garage inside the city center, and out stepped my mother, looking incredibly sharp and completely devoid of her previous false tears. She walked toward my unmarked sedan with a cold, arrogant confidence, holding a thick manila folder wrapped in official corporate seals. She dropped the documents directly onto the hood of my car and stated that the Vance family still controlled enough hidden offshore accounts to buy the best legal mercenaries in the country. My mother demanded that I step down from my position as captain and sign a formal non-disclosure agreement regarding the remaining properties in exchange for $5 million deposited into a Swiss bank account. She threatened that if I rejected her final offer, her legal team would publish a completely fabricated personal diary that would destroy my reputation within the department and force a dishonorable discharge. I looked at her bitter face with a sense of absolute pity before activating my tactical body camera and telling her that bribery of a federal officer carried a mandatory consecutive 10-year prison sentence. My mother turned completely pale as the bright red activation light of the body camera began to flash rhythmically against her expensive diamond necklace. She snatched her folder off the car hood, screaming that I was an ungrateful monster who would die alone in a government office before she quickly climbed back into her vehicle and sped away into the city traffic. I immediately uploaded the encrypted video file to the Internal Affairs server and drafted a comprehensive intelligence brief for the federal prosecutor assigned to the case. The next morning, my commanding officer called me into his main office to inform me that the anonymous political action committees funding Julian's defense had just been linked to a major foreign shell company. It became glaringly obvious that my family was no longer just committing simple financial fraud, but had actively aligned themselves with hostile entities seeking to compromise our domestic infrastructure systems. The federal judge handling Julian's civil appeal ordered an emergency closed-door hearing at the federal courthouse downtown after receiving our new national security intelligence brief. My mother and her team of high-priced attorneys sat on the left side of the room, looking incredibly smug and confident that their manufactured data logs would force my suspension. I took my place at the witness stand wearing my formal dress uniform, with my medals pinned neatly to my chest, looking straight at the council members without showing a single emotion. The defense attorney stood up and aggressively accused me of using classified government tracking programs to illegally monitor his client's private real estate transactions without a valid warrant. I waited until he finished his lengthy, dramatic presentation before presenting a certified global network log from the Federal Reserve showing that Julian had actually volunteered his corporate passwords to the foreign shell companies 3 years ago. The defense attorney's confident expression completely vanished from his face as the chief federal prosecutor introduced the video of my mother's attempted bribery inside the parking garage. Julian, who was watching the proceedings via a secure digital video link from his prison cell, Supdo Huantuan, and began screaming at his own mother for ruining his final chance at freedom. The federal judge slammed his heavy wooden gavel down onto the desk, declaring the entire civil appeal completely fraudulent and ordering the immediate arrest of my mother for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Federal marshals stepped out from the back of the courtroom, placing heavy iron handcuffs around her wrists, while the assembled media reporters frantically began taking photographs of her dramatic downfall. I stood at absolute attention, watching the security details guide her out of the room, feeling an incredible sense of absolute validation, because true justice is an unstoppable force against greed. By the time the winter snow began to melt away from the edges of the federal district headquarters, the final remnants of the Vance family conspiracy had been entirely neutralized forever. My name is Evelyn Vance, and I am 35 years old, a highly respected captain in the United States Federal Special Task Force who had successfully defended her badge and her country. Julian was officially transferred to a maximum security penitentiary, with an additional 10 years added to his original sentence, while my mother joined my father behind federal bars. The hidden offshore millions were completely recovered and redirected to fund public infrastructure projects across the nation, according to the final executive orders. I took my seat at my Grand Command console, opened the fresh morning digital intelligence feeds, and smiled quietly, because the long war against my toxic bloodline was finished and my true path was absolutely clear. The dynamic relocation of my international task force to a secure tactical facility in Northern Virginia marked the beginning of a fresh operational phase during the early weeks of spring. My name is Evelyn Vance, and I am 35 years old, a senior captain within the Federal Financial Crimes Division, who had completely severed all emotional ties with her convicted family. One quiet evening, while auditing the encrypted data servers, I discovered a series of highly sophisticated cyber attacks attempting to infiltrate our primary evidence database. The malicious code originated from a dark web network directly associated with the foreign shell companies that had previously funded my brother's fraudulent real estate schemes. It became immediately clear that the international criminal syndicate was attempting to remotely wipe the digital transaction logs before the upcoming grand jury hearings could permanently expose their political puppet masters. I immediately activated our secondary defensive firewalls and isolated the main mainframe terminals to completely block the unauthorized external access. The next afternoon, I decided to drive out to a quiet park near the Potomac River to meet my retired tactical mentor Raymond for a highly confidential progress briefing. The cold winter air had finally vanished, leaving behind a crisp spring breeze that rustled the fresh green leaves along the muddy riverbank. Raymond sat on a secluded stone bench, looking at the distant city skyline with his usual sharp, analytical gaze, before turning to review my tactical notes. I explained that the foreign syndicate was now using elite international hackers to target our primary federal servers in a desperate attempt to destroy the financial evidence. Raymond shook his head slowly, smiling grimly, and advised me to treat their aggressive cyber attacks as a massive tactical advantage rather than a security threat. He explained that by continuously tracing the active digital signatures of their hackers, we could locate the physical server farms they were operating from overseas. 2 weeks later, a heavily armored delivery van arrived at the high-security perimeter gate of Fort Meade, where my specialized unit was temporarily stationed. A man wearing a black corporate courier uniform requested an immediate signature from me regarding a collection of classified legal depositions from the district attorney. As I stepped into the concrete reception lobby, my tactical instincts immediately flagged his nervous behavior and the heavy tactical boots he was wearing under his civilian trousers. I refused to touch the digital signature pad and subtly stepped backward toward the reinforced security desk while signaling the armed gate guards. The courier suddenly reached into his heavy jacket, pulling out a silenced weapon. But I instantly utilized my close-quarters combat training to redirect his arm toward the ceiling. The weapon discharged harmlessly into the concrete structure, as 3 alert military police officers tackled him to the floor, securing his hands in iron cuffs. The captured assassin turned completely pale as the military intelligence team stripped away his fake identification cards, discovering a specialized passport from an Eastern European nation. He shouted that his organization had already deployed multiple tactical cells across the capital city to ensure my voice was permanently silenced before the trial. I stood perfectly straight with my hands clasped firmly behind my back, looking down at him with an expression of absolute professional contempt. I handed his encrypted satellite phone over to our digital forensics division, knowing that his failed attempt had just handed us the exact GPS coordinates of his local safe house. The security details guided him down the long concrete corridor toward the underground detention cells, while the base alarm system echoed loudly through the military complex. I walked back to my terminal feeling an incredible surge of absolute focus because their desperate violence proved they were utterly terrified of the truth. The Federal Bureau of Investigation utilized the recovered satellite data to execute a massive tactical raid on a hidden compound located in the Maryland countryside less than 4 hours later. The Federal Special Weapons Teams successfully neutralized the local tactical cell, recovering a massive cache of illegal weapons, advanced surveillance equipment, and specialized banking decryption keys. The captured documents revealed a secondary plot hatched by my father from inside his prison cell to utilize his remaining political favors to secure a fraudulent presidential pardon. By connecting my father's jailhouse communications directly to the foreign hit squad, the prosecutors were able to immediately file additional charges of treason and conspiracy to commit murder against him. I provided my official digital affidavit to the federal judge, ensuring that all visitation rights and outside communications from my parents were permanently revoked under national security protocols. The final grand jury hearing took place under unprecedented military security measures inside the federal district courthouse downtown, with armored vehicles blocking every single entrance. My mother and father were escorted into the courtroom in heavy chains, looking completely broken old and stripped of their previous arrogant upper-class confidence. I took the central witness stand in my pristine dress uniform, looking directly at the panel of federal judges without showing a single trace of personal hesitation. The defense team tried one last desperate maneuver, claiming that the international assassination plot was entirely fabricated by my special task force to deny the defendants a fair trial. I calmly pressed the activation button on the projector display, revealing the verified financial transfers from my father's secret offshore account directly to the hit squad's operational handlers. The lead defense attorney dropped his paper files in absolute silence as the federal judge stood up to deliver the final historic racketeering judgments against the Vance network. My father was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, while my mother received 20 consecutive years for her active role in the treasonous financial conspiracy. The remaining hidden corporate assets worth over $80 million were permanently confiscated and transferred directly to fund national cyber defense infrastructure projects. I was officially promoted to the rank of major and received the prestigious Federal Law Enforcement Cross from the director of the agency for my absolute dedication to the nation. My name is Evelyn Vance, and I have permanently proven to the world that true honor is a fortress that can never be compromised by family greed or international terror. The high-profile promotion to major did not mark the end of my operational duties because the global syndicate involved in my family's fraud scheme was still actively running networks across Western Europe. My name is Evelyn Vance, and I am 35 years old, a highly decorated major within the Federal Financial Crimes and Counterintelligence Task Force. One quiet morning during my transition to the Pentagon Security Annex, I received an encrypted communication containing a series of strange transactions originating from a private bank in Switzerland. The digital footprints revealed that a secondary shell company linked to my father's former corporate associates was currently trying to liquidate $40 million in hidden assets. This specific account was registered under a fake corporation that my brother Julian had set up during his initial infrastructure projects before his federal arrest. I realized that the criminal network was attempting to completely drain the remaining stolen funds before our International Recovery Task Force could officially execute a formal seizure. The following morning, I scheduled an emergency tactical meeting with my senior field mentor Raymond at an isolated operations facility located along the coast of Virginia. The cold ocean air blew fiercely across the empty sand dunes, creating a sharp contrast to the high-intensity digital warfare taking place inside our secure intelligence room. Raymond reviewed the newly recovered financial routing sheets, nodding his head slowly, and noting that the international network was clearly desperate to retrieve their hidden cash reserves. He advised me to monitor the live accounts without executing an immediate freeze, because the syndicate's main money launderers would eventually have to log in from a physical location to authorize the final transfer. He reminded me that by allowing them to initiate the digital process, we could trace their encrypted satellite signatures directly to their secret communications hub. I agreed completely with his tactical strategy, returning to my primary command terminal with an absolute determination to finish the mission. 2 weeks later, a suspicious civilian transport truck pulled up to the outer security checkpoint of the specialized defense installation where my team was analyzing data. A man wearing an official government maintenance uniform stepped out claiming he had an urgent work order to service the main fiber optic cables near our secure underground laboratory. As I walked down to the reception area to check his credentials, my military training immediately detected multiple tactical red flags in his posture and the specialized combat gloves he wore. I quietly reached for my secondary service weapon while commanding the base security detail to instantly close the heavy steel blast doors of the lobby. The operative realized his cover was blown, pulling a weapon from his tool belt, but I instantly executed a forward tactical maneuver, disarming him before he could fire a single shot. 3 armed military police officers threw him onto the floor, securing his hands in steel cuffs, while the base alarm system began to wail loudly. The captured foreign operative turned completely pale when our intelligence team stripped away his fabricated credentials, discovering an encrypted military communication device hidden inside his jacket. He angrily spat on the concrete floor, screaming that his international handlers had already marked my name for absolute elimination before the main federal grand jury could assemble next month. I stood perfectly straight with my hands behind my back, looking down at him with an expression of complete professional indifference. I handed the encrypted device over to our digital forensics laboratory, knowing that his failed ambush had just handed us the exact network frequencies used by his local handlers. The security guards guided him down the reinforced corridor toward the high-security isolation cells, while my tactical team prepared for an immediate response. I walked back to my desk feeling a tremendous surge of focus because their desperate reliance on violence proved that our financial investigation was completely destroying their organization. The Federal Bureau of Investigation utilized our fresh tracking data to coordinate a massive tactical raid on a hidden commercial warehouse located near the docks of Baltimore less than 6 hours later. The specialized federal response team successfully captured 5 international cybercriminals, recovering a massive network of server farms, illegal satellite dishes, and stolen military communication codes. The recovered digital documents revealed that my father had managed to send a coded letter from his prison cell, giving the syndicate the necessary master keys to access the hidden Swiss bank account. By connecting my father's active prison communication logs directly to the foreign tactical cell, the federal prosecutors were able to file secondary charges of high treason against him. I signed the official emergency motion ensuring that my parents were immediately transferred to maximum isolation units with zero access to outside male or civilian legal visitors. The final international asset recovery hearing was conducted under unprecedented combat security measures inside the main federal district court, with tactical teams guarding the entire perimeter. My mother and father were escorted into the courtroom, wearing orange jumpsuits and heavy security chains, looking completely shattered old and stripped of their former wealth. I took the central witness stand in my immaculate service uniform, presenting our digital evidence to the panel of federal judges without a single trace of hesitation. The defense team tried a final desperate legal maneuver, claiming that the entire assassination plot and the server data were completely fabricated by my special task force to deny the defendants a fair trial. I calmly activated the primary digital display screen, revealing the verified blockchain transfers from my father's hidden offshore account directly to the hit squad's operational network. The lead defense attorney dropped his folders in absolute silence as the chief federal judge stood up to deliver the final historic racketeering judgments against the remaining Vance network. My father was officially sentenced to permanent life imprisonment without the possibility of future parole, while my mother received an additional 20 years for her active role in the treasonous plot. The remaining $40 million in hidden Swiss assets were completely recovered and redirected to fund national, military, cybersecurity infrastructure systems. I returned to my command desk at the Pentagon, looking out at the morning sun rising over the capital city with a profound sense of total victory. My name is Evelyn Vance, and I've officially proven to the world that the honor of a dedicated United States military officer can never be broken by family greed or global terror. The complete neutralization of the local cell in Baltimore allowed my Joint Counterintelligence Unit to launch a massive tracking offensive against the remaining international operatives who had escaped our initial dragnet. My name is Evelyn Vance, and I am 35 years old, a highly decorated senior major within the United States Federal Special Investigations Command. One stormy night, while analyzing decrypted satellite telemetry records, I noticed an anomaly involving an encrypted digital broadcast originating from a deep-sea container ship sailing just outside territorial waters. The vessel was flying a flag of convenience, but its hidden digital transponder was utilizing specialized military encryption keys that my brother Julian had secretly downloaded before his capture. It became instantly obvious that the syndicate's leadership was attempting to use this floating communications hub to remotely execute a second massive wire transfer from the remaining frozen Federal Reserve infrastructure accounts. I immediately contacted our naval intelligence liaisons to coordinate an emergency maritime interdiction operation before the digital thieves could finalize their routing commands. The following morning, I boarded an advanced tactical transport helicopter alongside my veteran operational mentor Raymond to supervise the maritime tracking operation from a nearby coastal air station. The violent Atlantic waves slammed against the rocky gray cliffs below, creating an atmosphere of intense urgency that perfectly matched the high-stakes digital war we were waging. Raymond adjusted his tactical headset, looking over my live monitoring console, and noted that the criminal syndicate had made a critical mistake by relying on a moving vessel for their primary data uplink. He explained that a satellite connection established from international waters required an incredibly long signal holding time, which allowed our forensic systems to map out their entire network architecture. He advised me to wait until the exact moment they initiated the primary handshake protocol before transmitting a specialized counter-subversion virus into their system. I nodded in full agreement, watching the signal strength indicators climb rapidly as our naval assets closed in on the target's position. 2 weeks later, an unexpected package arrived at my secure apartment complex in Northern Virginia, labeled as a certified medical shipment from the main military hospital in Washington. When I examined the delivery voucher at the security desk, My tactical training immediately alerted me to multiple anomalies, including an expired Department of Defense courier badge number. I refused to accept the container ordering the complex security guards to completely evacuate the lobby area while I initiated a standard emergency hazard protocol. A specialized explosive ordnance disposal team arrived within 10 minutes, utilizing advanced robotic systems to safely extract the package and move it into a containment vehicle. The subsequent technical report revealed that the box contained a highly pressurized chemical device designed to detonate upon opening to permanently eliminate me before the upcoming federal court hearings. The failed assassination attempt turned completely against the syndicate when our technical forensics team successfully extracted a live digital signature from the automated tracking chip embedded inside the explosive device. The hidden data chip revealed that the weapon had been constructed inside a hidden industrial laboratory located in an abandoned warehouse district near Philadelphia. I stood at absolute attention inside the command room watching our real-time mapping systems pinpoint the exact location of the facility while my field agents prepared for immediate deployment. I handed the verified intelligence file directly to the regional tactical commander, knowing that their desperate resort to physical violence was a clear sign of impending collapse. The operational sirens echoed through the secure bunker as our tactical units moved out to execute a simultaneous multi-point raid on the criminal stronghold. The Federal Special Weapons and Tactics units executed the high-intensity raid on the Philadelphia compound, less than 3 hours after receiving our digital tracking data. The operation was a massive success, resulting in the immediate capture of 4 elite international saboteurs and the total seizure of their main manufacturing equipment and network servers. The recovered hard drives contained explicit text files proving that my father had managed to bribe a corrupt prison guard to smuggle out specialized operational orders to his external hit squad. By connecting my father's active prison communication trail directly to a domestic terrorism plot, the chief federal prosecutor was able to instantly upgrade his criminal status to maximum security isolation. I provided my official digital affidavit to the Department of Justice, ensuring that both of my parents were permanently moved to separate underground containment wings with zero access to human contact. The grand jury convention took place under unprecedented battlefield security measures inside the main Federal District Palace of Justice, with armored columns guarding every single avenue of approach. My mother and father were marched into the central courtroom under a heavy security escort, wearing maximum restraint chains and looking completely broken old and stripped of their former elite status. I took the witness stand in my formal dark blue service uniform with my combat medals pinned neatly to my chest, looking straight into the eyes of the jury without a single trace of hesitation. The defense attorneys tried one final desperate theatrical maneuver, claiming that the entire maritime interception and the chemical device were completely fabricated by my unit to force a conviction. I calmly pressed the primary interface console, revealing the verified global bank wire transfers that my father had signed from his cell directly to the bombmaker's handler. The primary defense attorney dropped his legal files onto the floor in absolute silence as the chief federal judge stood up to read the historic final treason judgments against the Vance Syndicate. My father was officially sentenced to permanent life imprisonment inside a maximum security supermax facility without any future possibility of parole, while my mother received an additional 25 years. The remaining $90 million in hidden international assets were completely recovered and redirected to fund specialized national defense cybersecurity research programs. I returned to my command station at the Pentagon, looking out at the morning sun, illuminating the national monuments with a profound sense of absolute triumph. My name is Evelyn Vance, and I have permanently proven to the world that the honor of a dedicated United States military officer can never be broken by family corruption or global terror. The official transition of my counterintelligence division back to the main Pentagon campus went perfectly during the calm weeks following the high-profile treason trial. My name is Evelyn Vance, and I am 35 years old, a senior major within the United States Federal Special Investigations Command, who had completely neutralized her corrupt family. One rainy afternoon, while archiving old legal case logs on my secure computer terminal, I received a direct encrypted notification from a federal medical director in North Carolina. The digital document stated that my father had suddenly suffered a fatal cardiac arrest inside his maximum security isolation cell earlier that morning. According to the standard Federal Bureau of Prisons protocols, his remains were to be processed immediately through a quiet municipal cremation with zero military or civil ceremonies. I closed the digital file, slowly feeling a profound sense of absolute stillness in my chest, because the man who had spent decades minimizing my life was finally gone. The next morning, I decided to take a long, reflective walk around the quiet monuments near the National Mall to completely clear my mind before the next global briefings began. I unexpectedly ran into my retired tactical mentor, Raymond, who was sitting on a wooden bench feeding the small gray birds near the reflecting pool. He looked up at my calm expression, nodding his head wisely, and remarked that when the deep roots of a poisoned family tree finally wither away, the remaining branches can finally grow toward the light without any weight. I sat down beside him on the cold wooden slats, explaining that my father had passed away and that the final dark chapter of our relationship had officially concluded. Raymond placed his hand on my shoulder, advising me to focus entirely on my upcoming senior command board, because my true legacy was the unyielding honor I had maintained through the darkest betrayals. His steady words brought an immense wave of validation to my spirit as I walked back to the command complex. 2 weeks later, my specialized federal asset recovery team sent a comprehensive closing manifest, confirming that the entire $90 million in recovered international funds had been officially distributed to national defense projects. The local real estate assets and fraudulent construction businesses previously owned by Julian were permanently dissolved, with all proceeds liquidated to compensate the public victims of their infrastructure scam. My brother Julian had also abandoned his final desperate attempts to seek an administrative sentence reduction after being transferred to a maximum security penitentiary in Colorado due to his constant behavioral infractions. The massive corrupt network that had once threatened to completely destroy my reputation and compromise national security was now completely erased from the federal system. I signed the absolute final closing declarations, knowing that my name was now completely clean and permanently disconnected from their historic financial crimes. By the time the warm spring sun began to dry the grand parade grounds outside the Pentagon, my official nomination for promotion to lieutenant colonel had been formally approved by the Military Review Board. My name is Evelyn Vance, and I am 35 years old, a highly decorated senior officer within the United States Federal Special Investigations Command who had successfully conquered the ultimate family betrayal. My brother was securely forgotten inside his concrete cell. My father's shadow had vanished completely from the earth, and the stolen millions were now protecting the country. I had proved to the entire world that true victory is not found in corrupt bloodlines or stolen fortunes, but is forged entirely through absolute honor, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. I stood at the high balcony of the command facility, watching the American flag wave majestically under the morning sky, feeling an incredible sense of absolute freedom. The final morning of the operational cycle arrived with a clear blue horizon, signifying a completely new beginning for my career and my personal life, far away from the toxic past. My name is Evelyn Vance, and I am 35 years old, a lieutenant colonel in the United States military who had successfully broken the chains of family greed through pure dedication to justice. I walked into my newly assigned executive office, taking my proud seat at the Central Command Console, where the global digital surveillance monitors flickered with real-time intelligence updates. The long, painful war against my own blood was officially over. The system was completely purified, and my future within the department was absolutely secure. I smiled quietly to myself as I entered my encrypted authorization codes to initialize the morning network feeds, knowing that my true destiny had finally begun.